Hey there, I'm Alex Kidman. This is the Logic L66M budget smartphone. Let's get into the review. So the thing about the Logic L66M is that it's a cheap smartphone. Well, yeah, but no, not quite. So when I first recorded this particular video, the vendor had told me that the L66M was going to come to the Australian market for $99. And that's a very particular kind of budget price point. But it's not the case. It's not actually coming to the market for $99. It's going to sell for $179. And that really does change its value proposition and the phones I need to compare it against. I haven't killed this review, but I am re-editing it to more reflect where it really sits in that value equation. So if this video jumps around a bit, that's why, but I'll try and explain it as I go. And any smartphone that costs you under $100 is by definition cheap. And there's absolutely a market for that. But of course, with that, with building to that kind of price point, there's all sorts of assumptions that you can make about how this has been built, what the camera is going to be like, what the performance is going to be like. And look, I'll cut a long story short here. Almost everything you might assume about this phone is probably fairly accurate. I could stop the review right here. Okay, you probably want to know a little bit more. And yes, I have actually probably tested this thing. I can tell you a bit more because even if you're only buying a low-cost smartphone, you want to make sure that you're actually getting good value for money. I think that's actually even more important, arguably, at these kinds of price points for the market who can afford these kinds of phones. And again, no judgment here. Absolutely, there are people for whom this is the kind of phone that they can afford, or for certain cases, it's enough phone for them. It's all the phone that they want because they just want the very basics and they don't want to spend a whole bunch of money on a phone. Again, perfectly valid use cases. So let's get into the review. First of all, taking a quick dive into the design. Not that there's too much to say about the design because you can kind of see it from here. The L66M is built around a 6.6-inch 720p capable display with a teardrop style notch. Now that's kind of a slightly older style, but then there's a lot about this phone that's kind of a slightly older style. And again, we are building to a price point. As you might expect for your $99, you're just getting a plastic body phone. Don't be fooled by the kind of semi-metallic glint coming off this grey body. This is all just pure plastic. Around the back, you'll also find the fingerprint reader for unlocking, of course. Now again, that's a bit of an old school thing. Been a while since I've seen a rear fingerprint reader. And some people really do like that approach, but a lot of the market has switched to that kind of combo power button fingerprint reader. On the L66M, the power button just gets to be a power button sitting beneath the volume controls. Otherwise, the only other controls you've got are at the base a standard headphone jack, always nice to see, and USB-C charging. Great to see because I'm so happy that even in this kind of space, micro USB charging is no more. One nice detail here is that the phone itself is dual nano SIM, but it's dual nano SIM plus micro SD. So you can have two full nano SIMs in there plus a micro SD card. However, it'll only take micro SD cards up to 128 gig maximum. So you do have some storage constraints to play with there. And look, none of this is particularly fancy, but that's not the point. It's not particularly robust either because, again, it's just a plastic body phone. And you probably know what I'm going to say here if you've seen any of my phone reviews. Put a case on it. But Alex, I hear you cry, it's a $99 smartphone. Surely there aren't cases for that. Well, yeah, there are. For a start, you get one in the box. Now, yes, this is a very simple and slightly hard to squeeze on plastic case. It's not going to do a ton of protection, but searching around, yeah, I could actually find some other cases on Amazon and other places for this particular phone. So it can be protected, and it should be. Again, if you're in the market for a $99 smartphone, why not protect that $99 smartphone? Just obviously don't go crazy buying super expensive cases. What about the camera? Well, look, camera quality is the one area where budget phones tend to struggle, and that's not an opinion, that's a statement of fact. The Logic L66M has two lenses on the back, as you can see, but you'll actually only shoot with one of them, the primary wide 13 megapixel. The other is just a VGA lens for theoretical focusing. Yeah, doesn't do a great job of that, but it is only a VGA lens, I suppose. While at the front, you've got a 5 megapixel selfie snapper sitting in that teardrop. And look, If there's a part of the Logic L66M that I dislike the most, it's the camera. And it's not that it's a mediocre camera, because I can accept this is still a $99 smartphone. And I know I keep saying that, but the price is very much the point here. No, my annoyance stems from the fact that this is a phone with a really slow, quite hard to use camera. So with only one lens on the back, you're kind of limited in the shots you can take. Yes, you do get digital zoom, but it only goes up to 4 times and it's not spectacular to look at. And an awful lot of the time, what I ended up doing to try and get reasonable-ish shots was just to take an awful lot of them, a whole spray and pray approach. Because far too often, when I was trying to take a nice photo of my cats or something, I'd end up having to take about half a dozen of them, because even if they didn't move that much, it was enough just to create a blurry mess. It really wasn't that satisfying. Again, totally within the expectations of this particular price point. Maybe camera doesn't matter to you that much. The camera here is easily my least favorite part of the phone. And of course, some of that comes down to the processor and how it handles those kinds of functions. So we'd better get on to performance. The Logic L66M is built around a low-end Unisoc processor with 4 gig of RAM. Now, Logic play some games here. They sort of claim that it's 8 gig. It's not. It's 4 gig of actual RAM and then up to 4 gig of virtual RAM, which is using the storage to act as RAM, but nowhere near as efficiently. Plus 128 gig of onboard storage. You can bolster that up with microSD, which is, of course, nice to see. It's running Android 13, and there's just no detail at all about whether or not it will see updates, but I wouldn't put any money on that whatsoever. The phone that I'm holding in my hand here right now, and I'm recording this in September 2024, has the January 2024 security updates applied, so it's already quite far behind the mark on that score. Again, that's not unusual for these budget phones. It really, truly isn't. But what does all of that do to performance? Well, this gets tricky for your budget phones because an awful lot of them don't benchmark all that well, if they'll even benchmark at all. And the Logic L66M, to its credit, did benchmark, but it didn't benchmark particularly well. So here's how it compares against the Motorola G04, for example, using Geekbench 6's CPU test. Now, when I originally recorded this course, I had to say that the Moto G04 was a more expensive phone, but it isn't. They actually cost the same. And that does not put the Logic L66M in a particularly good performance light. It really shows how you can do better at this price point. And it's no better when we switch over to GPU, in fact, because there I could actually get 3D Mark to run on an actual $99 phone, which was still better equipped to handle graphics duties than the L66M was. At $99, that was kind of forgivable. $179, much harder sell. Now, I don't honestly think that too many of the Logic L66M's potential buyers sit up late at night thinking, I wonder what its 3D Mark scores are like. No, they don't. But they will be fussed about its performance. And the reality is, yeah, this is a slow phone. That's to be expected. You will get some lag in between apps, switching up, but even just loading some apps. It's interesting, really, that they opted for Android 13 for this phone and not Android 13 Go, for example, because this would, I think, do a little bit better with that cut-down version of Android. But it's not where they went. And the end result is, yeah, look, it will run Android apps, although run is not the right word here. It will kind of tolerate them. They're okay, but you really will have to put up with a fairly slow-acting phone. One of the key selling points of the Logic 6XM is that it's a 4G LTE phone. And in fact, the box lets you know about this because it's being sold around the time that 3G networks here in Australia are being decommissioned. I should bring the box into shot, actually, because it's a lot of box. I mean, check out that colour. I don't think I've seen that many colours on something since hypercolour t-shirts were in fashion. But yes, it does state here, compatible with all Australian 4G mobile networks. So if you're looking for a phone because you've been told, oh, your existing phone is 3G only, or it's not going to work once 3G is shut down on Telstra and Optus, then yes, this will fit the bill. I have tested it. It runs about the same as most 4G phones do in Sydney. No better, no worse, really. You're not going to see 5G at this kind of price point, so suitable for task there. There is one other feature I really would have liked to see here, or at least I should say that I think some buyers might want that's not present, and that's NFC. So NFC is used for your contactless payments, for using your phone like it was a tap-and-go credit card kind of deal, and it's not present here. Not surprising, because this is undeniably going to be a Chinese reference model that they've used for building this, and actually you can really tell that simply because in the notification blind, if you pull it down, there's actually a separate section for QR code scanning. And you might be thinking, what's QR codes got to do with NFC and banking payments? Well, the reality is, in an awful lot of the Asian market, QR codes are what you use for those kinds of payments and bookings and all sorts of other financial services. Here in Australia, NFC is far, far, far more common and used, but it's not present on this phone. So if you need NFC, you are going to have to look a little bit more upmarket than this phone. On the battery front, Logic boasts of the big battery in the L66M with a 5,000 mAh battery sealed inside. 5,000 mAh is virtually the default for Android phones these days. So it's not big, comparatively speaking, but that might feel like a big number to you. But as I've seen over so many phones, over so many years, the size of the battery helps. A smaller battery rarely is a good thing, but it's not the key determinant in whether or not something has good battery endurance, and the Logic basically doesn't. And to test this, I put it through my standard YouTube battery test, which is usually a 1080p YouTube video. This will only do 720p, so that's what I had to test with, but same video, same circumstance, fully charged, full brightness, moderate volume for an hour, to see how much the battery would drop. Now, this gives me a comparative picture against other phones, but also a likely picture of how a phone will perform over a day, because phones that drop below 90% on that test typically will struggle to last through a day, and the more they drop below 90%, the worse it gets. So, how did the Logic L66M compare? Yeah, that's not quite the figure that you would want to see, but what it does suggest is, with light to moderate usage, a day is feasible. With heavier usage, I mean, with very heavy usage, you can send any phone flight, of course. But with heavier usage, yeah, you're going to need to reach for a charger. As I mentioned before, it is USB-C, which is really nice to see for charging. Not particularly quick on the charging, and of course, you're not seeing wireless charging here at all. So should you buy the Logic L66M, or to put it another way, am I going to be throwing away every other smartphone that I have and replacing it with the Logic L66M? Well, no. It's not for me, but then I have the luxury of choice. I have the luxury of having a budget that would afford a slightly nicer phone, and So I'm back again, and obviously that $179 price point does change my perspective on this phone quite a bit. There's a big difference between a $179 phone and a $99 phone. And the unfortunate reality here is that while the Logic L66M works and operates, you can do better, and you absolutely should. You can get phones that are faster than this, that have better cameras than this, and that really leaves this phone as a very, very hard one to recommend. I can't see too many reasons to say, yeah, this is the phone that you should particularly buy, because at $179, you should shop around. There are definitely better deals to be had. So that's my take on the Logic L66M. Got any questions? Hit me up in the comments below, and as always, thanks for watching, and don't forget to hit like and subscribe.